Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Apollas Odyssey. I'm your host, Apolla Asteria, and I'm excited to be back for another live show tonight. It's been a while since I've gone live because I've been traveling all over. I was just doing Contact in the Desert. I think I was about to do that the last time I did a live show. And then I ended up at the Disclosure press conference in Washington, D.C. right after, which I was not expecting to be at. So that's why I haven't done a live show in a while. And so the Contact in the Desert this year was really incredible, just to catch you all up on that. I met a lot of amazing new people at the event it was really exciting because there were a lot of new authors and speakers in the scene that kind of came to that event that I hadn't heard of before, which I think is really exciting because it's been a while since they had the last one. I think it was like 2 years because of the pandemic. So it was really exciting to come back, and obviously Disclosure has progressed a lot since before the pandemic. So it was amazing to come back and see so many new people a part of the event. I met a lot of new people at the conference that were just getting into the whole Disclosure UFO scene. So I thought that was really exciting. It was really cool. So it was definitely fun to be a part of that. And also, so the following weekend, I ended up going to the Disclosure press conference. I had some work out east, and my friends, the Cousins brothers over at Third Phase of Moon, were out filming the event. So I was already out east, so I just kind of made a last minute decision to go check that out, and I kind of joined them and assisted them with filming their new documentary project. So just wait up for that because that's going to be really cool when that comes out. And make sure, if you haven't seen it, there was an episode of all of us over in DC during the National Press Conference Day. So make sure you check that out on Third Phase of Moon. That's definitely really cool. So, but yeah, it was definitely really interesting to be a part of history at the Disclosure 2.0 press conference. It was a little disappointing that mainstream media was not really at the event, which was interesting because mainstream media was reporting all that weekend on the Las Vegas alien UFO sighting, which I'm sure you were all aware of. And then they didn't cover the press conference, which is really weird because there was a lot of really important information being shared there, including some military whistleblowers who came forward. And I really feel that a lot of these whistleblowers were very credible, and it was really important, the information that they were sharing. And what was really amazing is also Michael Schratt came in and shared these designs he basically got together from basically what the craft looks like from all of their reports and all of their accounts of what they had seen. And then my friend Joel Christopher Payne came in and did this kind of artistic 3D type rendering of it. So if you haven't seen the press conference, definitely, if you can, like, find it somewhere on YouTube or something and check it out. I know a lot of people in the UFO community, there's like been a lot of backlash about it and about people being there, but I think that that event was very important because it's kind of the missing link to the mainstream getting this information and understanding Disclosure better. And we need these kind of whistleblowers who are very credible. These are all guys that did a lot in the military and have very credible accounts of what happened to them and what they experienced. And it's something that people that are new to UFO disclosure can hear these accounts and, kind of get a better understanding of things without being, I guess, feeling too overwhelmed. So I think that's important. I think that's very important in regards to disclosure moving forward in the right way, personally. And a lot of people, I guess, would disagree with me, but I think it's important. So it was really interesting to be there. I was actually right in the front row during the conference, and it was really cool to be a part of that because I mean that was like the on the third day, the main day they actually had it. It was in that national press conference room where they hold all those things they do in DC all the time with the presidents and politicians and all that. So that was really amazing. I'm just reading the comments here. It's good to see everyone in here tonight. I know I haven't been keeping up with my regular Wednesday show. I know I try to be here every Wednesday, but please, if you can, just plan that I'll be here at 5 p.m. on a Wednesday. And if not, I'm like traveling, so don't worry about it. Um, so tonight's episode, I wanted to get into space habitats because it's something I talk a lot about in my presentation and solutions for humanity. And I have a few events coming up. So I want to kind of go over it with all of you and see what your thoughts are on these different concepts because I think they're really important. And I'll get into it more later, but just like briefly, the reason why I think they're important is because I just feel that they're very beneficial for humanity in so many ways. Um, you know, I'll say that for later. I'll get into that in a little bit. So, I actually was going to pull up part of my presentation I give normally. So I'm going to do that in a second. But before I get into that, I want to share a couple articles first on people who are already starting to work on space habitats. And actually, before I share those, I just want to say that through all my research with space habitats and how they work, I mean, basically, they're like controlled climates that we would have in the upper atmosphere. And it's not like what people are thinking with space stations. They're very different. It's actually a habitat with its own ecosystem, believe it or not. I know that sounds really crazy, and I'll show you in a minute. And basically it would be like a launch pad for going further into outer space because it's really hard to launch from the Earth's surface to go to outer space. But if we had somewhere or already in space to launch from, it's a little different. So that's one thing to think about, and also in regards to asteroid mining and things like that. So I want to get into that. But what's really interesting about these concepts, and before I share them and get into them, is that from all my research with them, it just so happens that usually sci-fi writers are the ones who originally came up with the concepts and they were writing them in their sci-fi novels. And then NASA and these other space agencies took them, these concepts, and they're looking at them and they're like, hey, maybe we could actually do something with this. And so that's basically what happened with a lot of these concepts. And I'm going to get into it. And it's very interesting, but I thought that was really cool. And, part of the reason why I'm sharing this also is because I am working on a project, which I won't get too much into, but it involves maybe sci-fi and things I'm writing. And also I'm hoping to have this project done by this event that is coming up in Vegas on November 11th. And that is Stairway to the Stars, which will be presented by Disclosure Fest. If you'd like to check that out, go to disclosurefest.org. And of course, yours truly will be speaking there. Let me just find myself on the lineup. Oh, there I am. So I'll be speaking at this event. I'll also be hosting and hopefully having a workshop or two. So I'm really excited about that. And obviously, I'll have my spears and all the other things I normally do. So yeah, I kind of want to get your ideas, your feedback on what you think about these different space habitats as I'm going through them tonight, because uh, it might be inspirational for me for this undisclosed project I'm working on. All right, so let's get started here. Oh, and I forgot before I get into it, please go check out my art at shamanspears.com, because if you want to fund me and help keep me going with my show, it's basically like donating to me, except that you get a present in return, which is really cool. So my shaman spears are all uniquely handcrafted energy channeling devices, which I invented myself, and they're all painted with crop circles that have been found around the world. And so I sold quite a bit at Contact in the Desert, and I have new ones that I made right before I went to Contact, which I have not put online yet. So I hopefully can do that in a few next few days here. But I definitely have some really cool new ones that I didn't sell yet that I made especially for that event. All right, so getting started here, I just want to share a couple articles about space habitats, and then I'll get into a little bit of my presentation briefly and cover that. Okay, so one person who's actually been working on a space habitat is Jeff Bezos. And I think this is really exciting because basically he's taking the design of the Stanford Torus, which is basically like an orbital ring that has a controlled climate with literally like its own ecosystem and everything inside of it. Like there'll be like plants and animals and everything, and it's really incredible. And when I started getting into these and researching them, I didn't realize he was actually already working on it. So this is going to be very interesting. So this article, when does this article come out? So it's interesting because these articles that talk about him getting into this came out usually around 2019, and I haven't really seen many come out since then. And I think like the secret or the project kind of went a little top secret at a certain point. So I don't really know what's going on with all that. But let me just continue with this here. So at a slick media event in Washington last Thursday, billionaire Jeff Bezos announced that his rocket company, Blue Origin, is developing a moon lander that could deliver cargo and astronauts to the lunar surface by 2024. But going to the moon is just the beginning of his vision. What he really wants to do, Bezos declared, is find a new home in space for our species. For near term problems like poverty and pollution, he said we need to find solutions close to home. But there are also long range problems, and we need to work on those too, he said. They take a long time to solve. You can't wait until the long range problems are urgent to work on them. In particular, Bezos worries that technological progress depends on an ever growing supply of energy. Within a couple of centuries, he said, we'll have outstripped any reasonable source of energy on Earth. And I don't agree with that because I think there's other kinds of energy, but going on here. His solution: move all planet into space colonies, enormous ones, and lots of them. These are very large structures, miles on end, and they hold 1 million people or more each, he explained. He envisions millions of such colonies housing trillions of people, sustained by continuous sunshine and vast resources available on the moon, asteroids, and other part of the solar system. And keep that in mind because I want to come back to that with asteroids. And so if you're watching right now, just take a look at this. This is partially what's going to look like on the inside. Like it's basically its own world. So, instant public response to Bezos' presentation included a lot of sharp commentary that the CEO of Amazon could easily be describing office parks or captive labor towns in space. Others objected that Bezos overstated the world's growing need for energy while ignoring his company's contributions to climate change and unsustainability. But many people within the space enthusiast community were thrilled. Al Globus, a former NASA contractor and co director of the National Space Society, had a one-word reaction: fantastic. George O'Neill's frontier vision. Bezos' ideas draw directly from the vision of Gerard K. O'Neill, a Princeton University physicist who attracted attention in the 1970s for his detailed concepts for human settlements in space. Bezos was a student at Princeton while O'Neill was there and has cited O'Neill's signature book, The High Frontier, as a major influence. Like Bezos, O'Neill worried. Let me just write that down actually before I forget. I need to read that book. So, The High Frontier by O'Neill. Sorry, taking notes during the show, but I definitely need to check that out. Okay. Like Bezos, O'Neill worried about the limits of growth on Earth, though he focused on overcrowding rather than limited energy. As population continues to expand, we'll have to abandon the development of greater individual freedom and accept a much more regulated life with diminished options. Space colonies would allow a far more inviting future, he claimed. There will be fewer people living on Earth and an increasing fraction living in space, where there's unimaginable room. Those in space colonies would also find the situation much more open and free. O'Neill's proposed colonies would be mile-wide spheres or cylinders spinning to create artificial gravity on the inside. They would be constructed from material mined from the moon and delivered into space using enormous electromagnetic catapults. And also, they could be mined from asteroids. Keep that in mind. Mirrors would pipe in sunshine, and solar panels would provide continuous electricity. As the population expands, people would simply build new cylinders to accommodate their needs. In endorsing O'Neill's approach, Bezos has set himself starkly apart from SpaceX founder Elon Musk, his rival space-obsessed billionaire entrepreneur. Musk has argued that humans need large outposts on Mars in case Earth is destroyed by an asteroid or is rendered uninhabitable by some terrestrial cataclysm. Bezos scoffs at that kind of thinking. We want to go to space to save the Earth, he said in 2016. I don't like the Plan B idea that we need to go into space so we have a backup planet. And I'm just going to pause out there. I think that's interesting that he would say that because, I mean, if Earth was, if there was an issue with Earth, if it was blown up or something, then I don't see how they could gravitate around Earth with a space habitat. But I guess maybe he just means if the surface of Earth is messed up. So, continuing on here, how to get from 6 to a trillion. Bezos describes an idyllic life aboard his future space colonies, each of which would have its own theme and function. Some might resemble historic cities, some might be space farms or interplanetary wilderness areas. And you could have a recreational recreational one that keeps 0 G so you can go flying with your own wings. So that's what I think is interesting. I'm going to talk about this later, but being able to have a recreational area and just make up games to like play, like floating around in space in these little areas would be really fun. Space taxis could carry visitors from colony to colony in a day or less. Meanwhile, heavy industry would be moved off Earth to preserve the unique gem of a planet. What Bezos didn't discuss at the Washington event was how exactly to make this glorious future happen. In 1973, when O'Neill was writing his first paper about space colonization, there were 3 people living in orbit. A half a century later, the number has risen to just 6. Broadly speaking, Bezos is betting that space industry can greatly accelerate by the process of driving down the cost of space access. And I'm just going to skip the rest of this here because it's just talking about, his company. So just coming back here to look at the comments. Okay, so one more before I get into my presentation here, and I think I just kind of want to share more. Let's see here. Oh, I deleted it. Okay, never mind. All right, so I'm just gonna get into one second here. Let me pull this up. Uh, okay. Okay, so I'm going to get into my presentation here because I just want to share with you all the different concepts and just kind of quickly go through them and discuss them. All right. Okay. Oop. Actually, I want to escape from that. All right, we're just going to do this like this. Okay, so here's kind of an idea of what we're looking at here with um what this orbital design actually looks like. And it features obviously a lot of really incredible architecture and greenery. So it will actually be a really nice environment, and it feels like you're on the planet still. And I think this is really incredible because of obviously, overpopulation. There's so many factors to this when it comes to space habitats, and part of it is overpopulation. People say that there's too many people using up the resources on the planet, but why would that be a problem if we can just move out there? Um, Also, getting into this here. Oh, here. Okay. So, also, if there's any sort of cataclysms on the planet, it's great to have these. And why not start working on them already? Like, we never know what's going to happen. So, I think it's important to already have these going and have them up here. And I know these pictures are really small, but here, I can actually make this look bigger so you can see it for a second. Um, but like it looks like you're on Earth. Like, there's like farming and trains and but obviously, you can still get the sunlight and everything coming through. And I'm not saying like, people should completely leave Earth, but I think it's incredible to have these things as an option. So let me just bring that back down. Also expansion without any ecosystems to destroy. Another objective would be to help Earth by, like I said, relieving population pressure. So one advantage is access to solar energy. Space has an abundance of light produced from the sun. In Earth orbit, this amounts to 1,400 watts of power per square meter. This energy can be used to produce electricity from solar cells or heat engine based power stations, process ores, provide light for plants to grow, and to warm space habitats. And then another advantage is an outside gravity well. So that makes it easier to export things back to Earth from space, which is something that we really need to think about if we start doing more in space, such as, like I've been saying, asteroid mining, and who knows what else we'll get into uh, as we become a spacefaring civilization. Another thing is in situ resource utilization. Space habitats may be supplied with resources from extraterrestrial places like Mars, asteroids, or the moon. These resources could include asteroid mining, and one could produce breathing oxygen, drinking water, and rocket fuel with the help of in situ resource utilization. It may become possible to manufacture solar panels from lunar materials. So what's amazing about this is we can start building them now in outer orbit and just kind of go to these other places outside Earth to mine these materials and build them up there instead of coming down to Earth to do that. And we really already have the technology to do that. So it's kind of just a matter of getting these missions together, especially because on some of these asteroids there are over $10 quadrillion worth of rare earth minerals just sitting there already for us to mine. So why not just start doing that? Also, like I said earlier, zero gravity recreation. There's like this one show, I think it was called Ender's Game, where they had, I think that's where I got this photo from. It was like where these kids, they were in like a space station or space habitat, and they were like, they made up some sort of game and they were like flying around in it. And so that's what's interesting. If we had these, we could actually have an area blocked off just for this, where the gravity area isn't, basically it's still zero gravity, and they don't have the thing to like turn it back to where it feel there's gravity again. And I believe, like I said before, it was they were going to spin the ring, and that's what creates the gravity. So that's why normally these habitats are in rings, because the ring spins and that's what creates the gravity. So maybe there would be a part coming off of the ring where you go into an area and go through, and then you come out in another area where that area is not spinning, and that's like the zero gravity area. And so the passenger compartments, a space habitat can be the passenger compartment of a large spacecraft for colonizing asteroids, moons, and planets. It can also function as one for a generation ship to travel to other planets or distant stars. And this is something, it's like a lot of people don't think about that. I feel like while building these is they can just, while other spacecraft or ways of exploring space faster with newer technologies are being created, then these things could just be dragged along with them or something, and just put in other places. So it could be like a multi-generational ship, or it could just be brought to a nearby planet or something, and they could start colonizing it from this. So it's kind of interesting to think about. Okay, and so now I'm going to get into the types of space habitats. But if you just look at this image here, this shows an example of, what the climate actually looks like in these. And, one thing that's interesting is, being inside these, you wouldn't get as much light pollution as you do on Earth. You would be able to see more in space. And that would be really incredible. But as you can see, there's birds and animals and nature. I'm not really sure how they go about making mountains and things like that, but apparently it's possible. So moving on here. So obviously the ONeill cylinder is the one I was just talking about earlier that Jeff Bezos is working on. And that is the one by Gerard ONeill, who wrote about it in his 1976 book, The High Frontier. And so basically, it's these two cylinders that are spinning in opposite directions to create the gravity. And and each would be about 5 miles in diameter and 20 miles long. Okay, so next one here. The Bernal Sphere is a type of space habitat intended on long-term home for permanent residents, just proposed in 1929 by John Desmond Bernal. Bernal's original proposal described a hollow, non-rotating spherical shell 10 miles in diameter with a target population of 20,000 to 30,000 people. And Island 1, and I'm not going to get into all of this here, but this is actually another offshoot of the Stanford Torus. And let me just read part of this here. One would be, so in this one would be capable of providing living and recreation space for a population of approximately 10,000 people, with a crystal palace habitat used for agriculture. Sunlight was to be provided to the interior of the sphere using external mirrors to direct it through large windows near the poles. The form of a sphere was chosen for its optimum ability to contain air pressure and its optimum mass efficiency at providing radiation shielding. And like I said, I already got into the Stanford Torus earlier, so you're moving on here. Okay, so this one is the one that isn't really as much talked about, but is really fascinating, and that is the bubble world or asteroid terrarium. So this concept calls for drilling a tunnel through the longest axis of a large asteroid of iron or nickel iron composition, and it fills it with a volatile substance, possibly water. A very large solar reflector would be constructed nearby, focusing solar heat onto the asteroid, first to weld and seal the tunnel ends, then more diffusely to slowly heat the entire outer surface. As the metal softens, the water inside expands and inflates the mass, while rotational forces help shape it into a cylindrical form. Once expanded and allowed to cool, it can be spun to produce artificial gravity by centrifugation, and the interior filled with soil, air, and water. By creating a slight bulge in the middle of the cylinder, a ring shaped lake can be made to form. Reflectors would allow sunlight to enter and to be directed where needed. So, this one was actually, like I said earlier, it was a sci fi novelist actually created a lot of these ideas originally, and now scientists are working on them. But this idea was actually created for a sci-fi novel, I think in the early 1900s. And I think this one's really interesting, mostly because, I've heard a lot about, other ET races supposedly doing something like this. And I don't know if that's true or not. But I think it's really interesting because if you had something like this, you could possibly direct it through space. And so it would be something that's already there that you could utilize, turn it into something else, and then you could basically find a way to drive it through space or kind of ride the tides of space. From what I've heard from physicists and people like that, they say that there's kind of like these tides in space that if you know how to utilize them, you can like ride them in a certain way. I know that sounds crazy, but look into it. It's actually really interesting. It's almost like it flows almost like water, or like being in an ocean and being pulled by a current. So if you had something like this and you had a way to kind of direct it, it might be a great way to travel through space. I don't know, who knows. So I think that's a really interesting one and not one that's talked about as much. So that's everything I had there with that. Let's see, I'll stop sharing here. Okay. All right, so I'm back. And just looking at the comments here, Sylvan Ford says that's a cool idea. Um and he says starting an orbital mining station in asteroid mining, placing the pan raw into orbit while starting the next step of building an orbital refining station. Exactly. So yeah, just reading the comments here and catching up on that. But all right, so it's a short show tonight, you guys. I just wanted to go through that quickly and share those concepts and designs. I plan on having more people on for interviews in the next couple months here while I'm not really traveling as much. And then I have another event coming up that I'll be speaking at in Glastonbury in August. So I'm really excited about that. That'll be around the first week of August, and that will be the Portal to Ascension conference. So make sure you look that up if you would like to be in England. If you're already in England or somewhere in Europe, I'm sure it'll be easy for you to get to. Or maybe you might want to just take an adventure to come out to Glastonbury and join me and some fellow speakers of mine, including Laura Eisenhower and some other people, to join the conference there and have a good time. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I am definitely going to be doing a very unique, different presentation of my Solutions for Humanity presentation, and it's going to be very interesting. So I hope you can join me out there. And thanks everyone for joining me tonight. Oh, and I love you too, Scott. Thanks for joining me. And I hope to see you all again next week, next Wednesday on Apollo's Odyssey. So until next time, over and out.